Welcome everyone. Let's begin our lesson for today by going over the learning goals and success criteria. First, what are we learning? We're learning how to find the slope and y-intercept of a function from an equation and how to find the slope and y-intercept of a function from a graph. How are we learning it? Through the Slope-Intercept Form notes and the Slope-Intercept Form assignment. When can we use this information? To calculate the amount of money in a savings account? How do you know you learned it? By getting a score of 4 on the Slope-Intercept Form assignment. Now let's take a look at our agenda for today. We will begin by going over the learning goals and success criteria. While we do that, you'll fill out your Get It Started. Once you've completed the Get It Started, we'll go over it together and answer any questions that you may have. After that, we'll go over the Slope-Intercept Form notes, and then I'll give you time to complete the Slope-Intercept Form assignment in class. Once you've completed the assignment, we'll go over it together and answer any questions that you may have. At the end of class, we'll go back over our learning goals and success criteria while you fill out your Before You Go. Your only homework for tonight is to continue working on the linear equation study guide and any incomplete assignments that you may have. Let's take a look now at the Slope-Intercept Form notes. The notes begin with the learning goals and success criteria. Now let's talk about slope. What is slope? Slope is a rate of change involving x values and y values. Slope is known as for being the change in the dependent variable over the change in the independent variable. Now what does that really mean? That really means that slope is the change in the y values over the change in the x values. So it's always y over x. And the next part you need to know is the y-intercept. The y-intercept is the point where the linear function crosses the y-axis. So we have a line here, and we can see that the y-axis goes here. So where do they intersect? Well, they intersect right there. That is what we call the y-intercept. So in this case, our y-intercept would be 2. Slope-intercept form. Slope-intercept form is written as y equals mx plus b. And what does that mean? M is the slope, and b is the y-intercept. Y and x are my variables that stay variables so that I can plug numbers in and see what they come out to be. So m is the slope and b is the y-intercept. Now how can I remember that? The easiest way I remember this is m represents the slope because it's a slippery slope to get hung up on your x. So think about it in terms of relationships. People that are involved in relationships and they break up, there's usually that one person in that relationship that's always hanging on to the relationship that's already dead. That's the slope. That's M. It's a slippery slope to get hung up on your ex. They are not together anymore. But the M is always trying to hang on. Notice how close they are. So M is trying to hang on, and it's a slippery slope to get hung up on your ex. Now B, on the other hand, is alone. Not attached to anybody. B is lonely. And lonely people ask the questions, why am I alone? Why does no one want me? Why does no one think I'm cute? That's B. B is always asking the why questions. Those are the y-intercept questions. So that's the way I remember it. It's a slippery slope to get hung up on your ex. And why am I alone? So that's the way I remember slope and y-intercept. Now, let's go ahead and pick out the slope and y-intercept from an equation. So we're given an equation, y equals 2x plus 4. And we want to know what is the slope of that line. Well, we know that the slope is the one that's attached to its x, right? So it's a slippery slope to get hung up on your x. So the one that's attached to the x in this case is 2. So the slope is 2. The y-intercept is the lonely one. Why am I alone? Well, the lonely one is 4. So my y-intercept is 4. So that's how I pick out the slope and y-intercept given an equation. Let's look at another example. We have y equals negative 3 halves x minus 3. Well, same thing. It's a slippery slope to get hung up on your x. So the slope is the one that's attached to the x, which is negative 3 halves. So that's my slope. And my y-intercept is the lonely one. Well, the lonely one in this case is negative 3. So b is negative 3. So that's how I find the slope and y-intercept from an equation. Now, how do I write the equation from a graph? Well, I'm going to use the slope, which is the change in the y values over the change in the x values. So I'm going to pick out 2 points. Luckily, they've already done it on the graph for me. And I picked this point, and I'm going to calculate the change in y. So how far down in this case did I go to get to here? Well, I went down 1, 2. So my change in y is negative 2. And I went to the right 1, 2, 3. So that's positive 3. So my change in x is 3. So it's negative 2 over 3, which is negative 2/3. So that's my slope. Well, the y-intercept is the y value when x equals 0, which in this case is right here. So my y-intercept is 3. So now I know my slope and I know my y-intercept. So I'm going to plug that into y equals mx plus b. Remember, the slope goes where m is. So the slope is negative 2/3. So this should say y equals negative 2/3 x. And b is 3. So I'm going to plug that in. So my equation for this line would be y equals negative 2/3 x plus 3. There's a video here also that shows you how to graph linear functions in Desmos. So you can go ahead and watch that. Let's talk now about how to check our work with linear equations using Desmos. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to desmos.com, just like this, and we're going to click on the link that says Graphing Calculator. And over here on the left side, we can enter the equation of any linear equation and it will graph it for us. So let's try y equals 2x minus 4. Well, as we can see, it graphs it for us. We can check that against whatever we did on our assignment now. And you can do it this way. Let's say we had an equation, though, that wasn't in slope-intercept form. We can still graph that on here and check our work. So let's say it was 4x minus 2y is equal to 8. And we can see that that's actually the same as this one. But we can look at this and check our work this way as well. It still graphed the equation in slope-intercept form, even though the equation we put in is not in slope-intercept form. So this is one way that you can check your work using Desmos to find linear equations. Let's take a look now at the slope-intercept form assignment. So if you look at the top of the page, we have our learning goals and success criteria here. If you continue to scroll down, we can answer now the questions for the slope-intercept form assignment. So the first question says, what is the slope and y-intercept of the function below? Well, it says y equals 2x minus 4. Well, we remember that it's a slippery slope to get hung up on your x. So the number that's attached to the x should be my slope. So in this case, my slope is 2. Notice it's not 2x. Because it's the 2 and the x are not together anymore. They've broken up. That's why it's the x. So my slope is 2. And my y-intercept in this case is the lonely one, which in this case is negative 4. Why am I alone? Negative 4. So my answer would be this one here. And we'll scroll down to the next one. What is the slope and y-intercept of the function below? Y equals negative 3x. Well, again, the slope is the number that's hung up on its x. So it's a slippery slope to get hung up on your x. So the number hung up on its x is negative 3. And the y-intercept in this case, there is none. So no one's alone. So when no one's alone, it's 0. So we have the slope is negative 3 and the y-intercept is 0. And you'll continue to answer all of these questions until you get to the end of the page. Once you get to the end of the page, you'll click Next. This will take you to your Before You Go. You'll go ahead and answer your Before You Go and then submit your work on Google Classroom.